Hello, welcome back to Wenzel's World, and I'm back in my world now, and enjoying a particular blend of tobacco that I've never had before. And so this evening, I've got my could be morning where you are, but I've got my Peterson pipe here. You've seen it before, and tonight for the first time I'm sampling this right here. Peterson's Sherlock Holmes. And here's what it says about it. It says a mixture of an old Irish recipe dating back to 1889. Hmm. It is one of the finest tobaccos smoked in the time of Sherlock Holmes. The straight Virginia blend possesses all the natural flavor associated with premier Virginia tobacco. It says that the strength is 4, aromatic taste 4, room note 3. So that's what it says about the Sherlock Holmes blend. And when I first started, I didn't really notice it. But here, of the last 2 times I've tried to smoke this, it's hard to keep lit. It's it was moist, but nothing more than usual with these blends that come in those tins like that. So I don't know why it's so difficult for me to keep this lit. You might be thinking, well, what does it taste like to you? Well, it tastes like tobacco. Well, you may be thinking, well, of course it tastes like tobacco, but what does it taste like? Well, yeah, let me put it this way. Like I say, this is the first time I've smoked this right here. Uh, I'm gonna put it in a jar since it's Virginia. It ought to cellar well, and maybe it'll be better after it cellars a while. Like I told you before, I've got in order these different Peterson blends to see what the Peterson line of blends are like. Of course, when you got the Peterson, when you got the nightcap, you got the old Dunhill. When you got the early morning pipe, you got the old Dunhill. Ain't I thinking right on that? And then with these other blends, then you've got, well, you got this Virginia. So anyway, ever who the blender of these recipes are, it came up with them. So I'm just sampling what the Peterson line is like. Of course, I said the Dunhill, or the old Dunhill blend. So you've got different blenders there. So anyway, I just interested in what these Peterson tobaccos blendings of these different back tobaccos are like. So we're into Sherlock Holmes right now. So let me get a little of this ash off of here because this done got down below half here, and I usually start taking the ash off, and it looks like you got to take the ash off of this. Get a little air to it or something. Try to keep it lit. Okay. Then let me try something else too. Let me take this pipe cleaner. See if I can get it in this little P-lip right here. Okay. All the condensation and everything ought to go. It's a Peterson system pipe, so you know, then you got this little chamber down here that takes all your condensation, juices, spit, whatever you want to call it, all winds up down in there. But the only thing I can tell you, just tastes like tobacco to me. So anyway, you say this channel is boring. Well, you know, I'm not into gymnastics, and I'm not doing cartwheels with a pipe in my mouth. So what do you expect from an old man sitting around smoking on a bent stem pipe? I mean, you know, what do you want me to do? Stand on my head and try to puff it? So anyway, but if you hang around though, sure enough, got something I want to talk to you about. Let me get a sip of this here good hot black coffee in my American-made coffee cup. Good and hot. Keep it on this here burner over here. Keeps it good and hot to the last drop. I want to talk to you some this time about the old Brush Arbor meeting days. Since it's here blend, they're a mixture of an old Irish recipe dating back to 1889. That's a long time ago, wasn't it? 1889. You know, back during the Depression days in that late, well, you might as well say the early 30s and through the 30s, those Depression days. It was, you know, I didn't live back there, but my parents did. My daddy was born in 1921. So he remembers real good the Depression days. He was a boy, you know, well aware of his surroundings and what's going on then when the Depression hit. And then during those 30s when he was coming up and all, matter of fact, when he got old enough, he joined the CC camp. I don't know if anybody remembers those old camps or not. I used to have a picture of him among those boys and so forth. I don't know. I guess my brother wound up with it, and that's cool. But anyway, and so, you know, so he was well aware of that. And I remember my daddy and other people that lived in that time talking about those days, how they would have brush arbor meetings. You ever been to a brush arbor meeting? You know what I'm talking about when I talk about a brush arbor meeting? The first time I remember going to a brush arbor meeting, I was a boy, and at that time we was attending church at what was called the New Macedonia Free Will Baptist Church. Now I'm not a Free Will Baptist today, And I wasn't back in those days. I wasn't saved, and so but my parents went there. And of course, I was a boy, you know, and of course that's where I went since I lived under my parents' jurisdiction. But anyhow, I remember them old people talking about brush harbors, and there was a fella over in Columbia, Tennessee. He wanted to build a brush harbor and wanted our pastor to come preach a meeting in it. So my daddy, he took us all. I can't remember going but once, maybe twice. I don't know how many times we went. Well, we went to the brush harbor meeting. You say, well, what is a brush harbor? Well, I tell you, sound like something in this thing. Good thing about them there Peterson's pipes and things like that. You can take them things loose, stick something down. Sound like something other's got it stopped up. Let me see if I get that thing going to where that tobacco chamber part is. And these here system pipes, if you crook that cleaner up a little bit at the tip end there, it'll go into that chamber. If you go make it go down like that, it's going to go into the chamber that holds the uh, the juices. Let me get over here and put some of that down in there. Okay, back to this again. What is a brush harbor? Well, they go out in the woods. Of course, I'm talking about, back in the days of the Depression, people didn't have anything much. And so you got your people that lived in town, and they were really bad off. Then you had your people then that lived the agrarian lifestyle. You say, well, what's that? Well, that's the farming lifestyle. I had one old fella. I remember him telling me when he was a boy living during the Depression. He said we didn't know there was a depression. He said we grew everything that we eat, and so we lived out on the farm, and so we didn't know there was a depression. He said, what did they do for water? They go out to the spring and get water. You said, well, how'd they pay the light bill? There wasn't no lights. There wasn't any electricity. So, I mean, so when the depression hits, whatever money they have may not be worth much or this and that. It might be hard to come by, but at least they can eat. Well, one of the things that was going on back in them days, people turned to the Lord. I mean, who else can help us? God, if you don't care for us, we're sunk. So, people turn to the Lord. And and part of that then was these old brush arbor meetings. A preacher'd come around, maybe a group of people in an area, or maybe a preacher would come around, and get to preaching, and they needed a bigger place for people to meet, or maybe they just wanted to meet in a neutral place, and they'd go out in the woods and they'd cut down poles, cut down trees for poles, and they would build these arbors. And the brush then that they had, that was left over, they threw up on top of it, so they had a shade and a shelter. And then, they might put down sawdust on the floor and had some type of benches, something to sit on. And that's what they had. I mean, they did the best. Drinking spring water, well water, or water from a cistern or something like that, They didn't have bottled water. I know when I was a kid coming up, they didn't have no such thing as bottled water. I don't remember going and buying bottled water. And so, anyway, so they'd put up these brush harbors, and these preachers would come and they'd preach and so forth. So there was a fellow over in Columbia, Tennessee, and he wanted to have a brush arbor meeting. So they built a brush arbor, and my daddy that took us every how many times we went to the brush arbor meeting, and that's better. I think I had too much. The tobacco was packed too much in that hole that draws through. So we went to that meeting, and I remember them old men talking about this ain't no brush arbor. Well, it wasn't done the way that they talked, that they remember it being done when they were boys back in during the Depression days. It was he'd built the thing, and enclosed it where they didn't have those brush arbors enclosed. He enclosed it around the side with plastic and things and put plastic on the top and had a door to come in. So it was, I don't know what kind of name you'd put on it. I guess sort of like a greenhouse. But anyway, and that was back in the 60s, the 1960s. Well, 20 something years later, then, whenever I was saved and started preaching, then there was some of us old church. We decided we wanted to get back to those old times and that old time way like that. And we built the brush arbor. And the way we tried to do it the way that those old men said it was to be done. So I had a man at church that was a logger, and we went out in the woods, me and him and some more men from the church, and the man let us come on his property and do it, one of the church members, and out in the country. And we went out there and we took chainsaws and cut down cedar trees and cut all the limbs off of them and had these poles. So we had I think we had one or two trees on a corner, and the rest of them we used poles. And then we took poles and put across the top of it, like a barn, pole barn. And we just laid them, across it like a shed roof. And we threw it. Now, we did put plastic on the top of it. And then we put on top of that, then we put the brush on top of that. And then I think we used folding chairs is what we used to sit on. Built a little platform to put the pulpit on. I preached there for 10 nights under the brush arbor that one year, and that was about 1988, I think it was. And then we met back then in, I guess it was 87, and we met back then in no, I guess it was 88. Then we met back again in 1989, I guess it was. And then I preached out there every night in overalls and a white shirt for 3 weeks. And so I had some good meetings. And I remember one old fella told us, he said, if it rains the first night, he said, we're going to have a good meeting. And you know what? Man, it rained cats and dogs that first night. And that plastic, we had so much rain that some of that plastic we'd put up there, began to rain to accumulate in one place. And it was real baggy where the rain was, and people sitting around. And I asked that one old fella, I said, Mr. Bradford, I said, Mr. Bradford, what did they people do back years ago when they didn't put up plastic and it began to rain? Did they dismiss? He said, well, no. I said, well, what did they do? He said, they just sat there. I said, you mean they sat there and listened to the preaching while it was raining and them getting wet? He said, well, yeah. I said, hey, explain that. I never will forget it. He said they were hungry for the gospel. Well, it's a lot different than what it is nowadays, ain't it? They were hungry for the gospel. So after that, then a few years later after that, I started a tent ministry. And matter of fact, this is the first tent that I ever had. That's how it looked and everything. It was a 30 by 50 size tent. Here's another picture of one of the meetings that we had. I'm sitting there on the front row. I don't know whether you can see me or not. And then I got another picture, me preaching in a tent in a different meeting from those that other one that you saw, and so forth. So I had preached in tent meetings in different places around. I bought that red and white tent. Then later on, that was vinyl. Then later on, I bought another tent, bigger, 40 by 60. It was canvas. It was blue and tan. And I preached in it a while and all. So those old days of the brush arbor meetings and outdoor meetings and things like that, people gathering in and the anticipation of what the Lord was going to do, and singing the songs out of the songbook, those old songs, those soul stirring songs and things like that. And my wife, she played the accordion in that first brush arbor meeting that we had that I preached in. We borrowed an accordion from a man, and she played the accordion. And boy, that sounded good. And those old meetings where the Spirit of the Lord would move and move upon the preacher, move upon people, and people were saved and stirred and lives changed. Oh, man, I long for those old brush arbor meeting days, those old outdoor meetings where the Spirit of the Lord moved and people changed. So anyway, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about those old days, those old brush arbor days. Well, I'm going to stop now. So I hope you have a blessed rest of your time awake, and what if it's morning for you or evening time. So you have a blessed day. We'll talk to you later.